Without denying that each of the countries that took part in the Second World War made its contribution to its course, it should be recognized that the main opponents then were still the USSR and Germany, and, accordingly, their leaders, Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin and Adolf Hitler. Hitler and Stalin are often referred to in the major ideological disputes that break out between the left and the right, as participants in a kind of terrible competition, the purpose of which is to determine which of them is the more vile the personality and who killed more people. However, our goal is analyze similarities and differences in modes to dictators. In the mass consciousness, Hitler, who came to power in Germany 85 years ago, remained a rabid Führer, a half-madman who, through intrigues and conspiracies, seized the highest executive power, and how Stalin was actually perceived in the Kremlin, in general personally, the founder and leader of the Nazi Party, the Reich Chancellor of the German government, and the creator of the Third Reich and his project. This is one of the most guarded secrets of the Russian archives. Traveling exhibitions at Victory headquarters are cloned annually, and a huge group of documents under the cipher G or Germany. War with Germany from the Fund No. 46 Inventory No. 3 Politburo, as it was slammed shut with the doors of safes in a special sector of the Central Committee of the All-Russian Communist Party 7 decades ago. It remains tightly closed in the presidential archive to this day. Nevertheless, documents pop up here and there, which allow if you don't put together the puzzle of the big game Stalin and Hitler, then at least connect the important points of the future picture. Let's start from the end and from the main problem, from Nuremberg and from the eternal and main question, the human cost of the multi-way geopolitical game of Stalin and Hitler. It is clear that the leader conducted the activities of the Soviet delegation at the trial of the main war criminals, and the answer to this question lies in Stalin's censorship priorities. It has recently become possible to assess these priorities. A curious document surfaced in Stalin's personal fund and became available. This is the draft of the opening speech of the prosecutor from the USSR at the Nuremberg trial, the prosecutor of the Ukrainian the SS, or of Roman Rudenko. What is remarkable about this typewritten text on 79 pages? The fact that it clearly shows that Rudenko was going to say, and what they didn't give him to say is if you compare it with the final version of the text. Stalin personally did not give it, with your edits and comments in the margins. The main array of text edits concerns to positions, and we'll talk about them. First of all, Stalin questioned the main objective outcome of the Bolshevik-Nazi relations, the catastrophic price victories expressed in human lives. Rudenko, for example, writes, "Millions of Soviet people were exterminated by Hitler's executioners." Stalin emphasizes millions and puts a question mark. It's about the victims. In another place, Rudenko reminds the court about people who were taken into fascist slavery. As documented, several million Soviet citizens were abducted from the Soviet Union into German slavery. Hundreds of thousands were abducted into German slavery from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. Stalin again does not like these millions as applied to Soviet citizens. He emphasizes and sarcastically asks the author, "How much is it?" The Kremlin interfere in the US presidential election about the martyrs from the Nazi death factories. The Majdanek and Auschwitz camps with gas chambers were already called here, where over 5.5 million innocent people were killed. Stalin emphasizes the number and puts a question mark. 5.5 million killed in the gas chambers. Seems to be genuinely amazed at such an effective genocide. Further on, the Kremlin censors dissatisfaction with the sad arithmetic continues. In particular, the Supreme Commander does not like the statement that hundreds of thousands, millions of Soviet people from the civilian population, as well as fighters and commanders of the Red Army, were tortured in Hitler's concentration camps. He emphasizes millions and puts a question mark again. At the same time, Rudenko, in his speech at the trial, will accurately indicate the number of 7 million horses, 20 million pigs, and 27 million sheep stolen by the invaders and goats and 17 million head of cattle. He will list 239,000 damaged electric motors, 175,000 metal cutting machines, etc. Stalin will have no complaints about these figures. They won't surprise him. But how many millions of Soviet people died in the war? The world will not hear from the USSR in the accusing speech of the chief prosecutor. There is only one explanation, the simplest one. The chief censor saw in Rudenko's text a hint of a wrecking coincidence, recognized signs that the drafter of the document did not even think about. Slander against the Soviet socio-political system and its law enforcement, competent authorities, the court and the prosecutor's office, the system of execution of punishments. Stalin crossed out the malicious paragraph. And not only that, in Rudенko's final speech, the Hitler Party was mentioned once, and without its official name, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The word ideology was uttered once, casually. There is no doubt that everything that suggested even the slightest analogy was completely erased. In full compliance with these unspoken guidelines, revealed by the leaders, and it's according to the text of prosecutor Rudenko, the Soviet propaganda machine will interpret fascism and Hitler for decades, and maniacally seek out and pursue, including through judicial procedure, any comparisons. Many people have heard about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, but few who knows that a year later the Germans offered the USSR a new treaty. If Stalin and Hitler had agreed then, the Soviet Union would have become a full-fledged ally of Germany 84 years ago. On November 40th of the year, Chairman of the Council of People's Commissars and People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs Vyacheslav Molotov, the number 2 man in the Soviet leadership, has completed his 3-day visit to Berlin. This trip was the last attempt to resolve the contradictions that had accumulated between the pact partners and prevent the outbreak of a Soviet-German war. After Molotov's visit, the Soviet-German war became inevitable in the very next few months. Here is what the general wrote in his memoirs. Heinz Guderian, the creator of the German tank forces, Hitler was very angry with the demands of the Russians and clearly expressed his displeasure during the conversations in Berlin, simply ignoring the subsequent Russian note. From Molotov's visit and the course of negotiations, Hitler concluded that war with the Soviet Union was inevitable sooner or later. What would have happened if Stalin and Molotov had accepted Hitler's offer and Ribbentrop? Probably, then Hitler would not have immediately attacked the USSR and shifted the center of gravity of the Luftwaffe's actions to the Mediterranean, and would have sent several of the best tank and motorized divisions there. But he would have left the bulk of the land army in the east in case of a Soviet attack. By agreeing to Hitler's proposal for a quadruple alliance, the Soviet dictator had a chance to strike first. But he decided to play big, hoping that Hitler would cede Finland for benevolent neutrality, Bulgaria and Turkey. However, such concessions made no sense to Hitler. The Soviet occupation of Finland posed a threat to Sweden, from where iron ore, vital to the Reich industry, was supplied. The USSR's control over Bulgaria put Romania and the German troops stationed there in an extremely difficult position, and also created a Soviet sphere. They had a common border with Greece, which threatened the Mediterranean strategy of Germany and Italy. Each of these two could not help but think about how to deal with their main enemy in case of victory. So, Stalin rather jokingly than seriously said that after the victory the USSR, he will order Hitler to be put in a cage so that all honest people can admire this monster in human form, unleash the most terrible war in history. These conversations somehow reached Hitler, who was extremely scared when he heard them. It is possible that it was the fear of turning from the ruler of the Third Reich into a universal laughingstock, locked in an iron cage, that became one of the main reasons why he chose to commit suicide without waiting for captivity. As for Hitler, he said that if Stalin turned out to be his prisoner, he would treat him with all possible respect. He will give you a castle with servants and allow you to lead an idle life of an aristocrat, but at the same time forbid you to leave the estate. However, apparently, these words of his were completely false and hypocritical. However, false and almost all of Hitler's statements were hypocritical. In addition, he tried more than once to arrange an assassination attempt on Stalin, which, you will agree, does not really correspond to the words about all possible respect and about granting the estate for personal use. In any case, regardless of how Stalin and Hitler verbally intended to deal with each other, the fate of the latter was decided during the Yalta Conference. During it, the Allies agreed on that if the Führer is captured by them, he will be put on trial, as the main war criminal will certainly be executed. So, the expansion carried out by the two dictators led to a bloody war. The Nazi Reich died, but the Soviet Union, which was among the victors, lost tens of millions of its inhabitants and was so weak and that it could not hold the acquired territories for a long time. These lessons should still be remembered today by all those who strive for expansion.